Good afternoon, guys. My name is Sergeant Locklear. Today we are going to be talking about accountability and the leader. The classification for this topic is unclassified. We do have a risk level, which is low. You have a tripping hazard because of wires. We also have a fire hazard. If they're in case of a fire, please know where your exits are. You have one at the back of the building and there's one at the front of the building. All right, before we move into accountability, I want to talk a little bit about why that's important, how it applies to the leader. All right, accountability is important because before anything that you do in the Army, you will always have an accountability formation, whether it be for the range, which is primarily what I'm going to use as an example for today, but also for PT, before you step off to do literally anything in the Army. You have an accountability formation, you do a head count, you check your equipment. Typically, they also check your dog tags and your ID card before you go anywhere as well. All right, moving into this, I want to start off with personnel. Using the range, for example, you have your ammunition detail, which they are specific individuals that are there to load magazines, make sure that you dispose of live ammunition at the end of the range properly. They're specifically there to do that so that way you don't take away from the trainees' time to be able to train and learn from this environment. Next, I'd like to talk about safety. Safeties are there not only, as their name says, safety, but also to kind of help coach the trainees that are on the range, to kind of tell them, hey, look, shooting high, you're shooting right, you need to adjust to do this, so that way they get a little more from that training. Next, you have your medical personnel. If something goes south, say for negligent discharge and somebody gets hurt, you need to have medical personnel on site that are qualified to be able to treat that. Another example is, what if you have somebody that's severely allergic to bees? They go into anaphylactic shock. You need to have your medical personnel there to be able to deal with that situation appropriately. Then you have your trainees who are actually there on site to be able to train. This is for them. The leader needs to have a head count of how many trainees are going to be there, how many are going to be training. With that number goes a specific number of safeties. So per every 15 trainees you have one safety. And then you also have a senior safety that's going to be in the range tower. So that's important. Moving into equipment, the leader needs to take into consideration how this equipment is going to be transferred, first and foremost, how personnel and how equipment are going to be transferred. That goes back into personnel as well. You need to have somebody that's specifically for transportation, your 88 mics. Typically they use an LMTV, sometimes they use cattle trucks. It just kind of depends on what they have available, what kind of strings the leaders can pull to get that equipment that's needed. Weapons are something that needs to be considered. Are you just doing a regular qual day with M4s? Are you qualling with M9s, M1911s? Are you doing any buddy team live fires? What kind of equipment comes with that? If you're doing the SAW, that's another thing that needs to be considered. If you're using an automatic weapon, that's going to use a lot more ammunition than what an M4 would use or an M16. So that's something else that needs to be considered. Moving down into that is ammunition. Need to take into consideration, again, how many personnel, how many trainees are going to be training, what type of training you're going to do. If you're doing regular qual, you need to have enough ammunition for that trainee to be able to qualify, to go through the whole iteration and qualify. Another thing that you need to consider with your ammunition, what if that soldier doesn't qualify? They're going to need additional ammo on top of what their already basic ammunition they would need. So that needs to be considered. You need to take a contingency plan for that as well. Moving down into training equipment. The soldiers' equipment, what they need to bring with them to the range. For example, of course, your regular OCPs, that's the uniform for the day, that's considered equipment. Their ear protection, eye protection, they need to make sure that they bring that. If they don't have ear protection, the leader can have a backup plan for that. They can bring foam earplugs to make sure that that soldier's ears are protected, stuff along those lines. If you're doing the buddy team live fire, you need to make sure that They have their IOTVs and their Kevlars, because that's part of the equipment for that too. As seen in this picture, there are a few soldiers that are taking and loading what looks like the range box, which is, it's for the senior safety that's in the range tower, some of the equipment that they need up there. Moving into training area, something that they need to consider is size. How many individuals can they put on that specific range for that iteration? How long is it going to take them on that iteration? How many iterations do they need to run to be able to get everybody through? It's something that the leader needs to consider. How long they're going to have that range, the time frame, how fast or slow, the wait time in between iterations, that all plays a factor, and that's something that the leader must consider. Wildlife and terrain. For terrain, if you're shooting on a concrete slab, do they need to bring elbow pads, knee pads, stuff to help them a little bit to be able to qualify a little easier? Those are factors that need to be considered. How long will the range be available? That kind of goes back into the how many iterations, how quick you need to do this, how you need to run this. You also need to back plan. If you need to be at the range at 9, what time do the soldiers need to be at the company? What time does the equipment need to be ready? If you're picking up anything from the motor pool, how long is it going to take you to draw the weapons from the armory? That's something that needs to be considered, as well as chow time. It's another thing that needs to be considered with the range. Are you bringing MREs for the soldiers? Are you going to be done before lunchtime? Those are a few things that need to be considered. That, with that being said, back planning can also be applied to a different situation. Accountability and leader can also be applied to different situations, like I said before, with PT formations. If, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing battle drills for PT, you need to be aware of how long that's going to take, how many soldiers, what kind of equipment they need, stuff along that nature. It's not just the range that you can take, for example. With any type of mission that you do, there's always going to be some type of accountability, and that generally goes towards the squad leader. You have a couple of young privates that are fresh out of basic training. Their team leader is going to be in charge of them. Then going from the team leader up is the squad leader. So there are different levels of leaders. They can delegate tasks and stuff of that nature, so it's not solely on one specific leader, but if you're looking at the topic as a whole. All right, moving into the check on learning. What is an example of some mission essential equipment?
Depending on what you're doing, but with the range and IOTV, iPro, AirPro, and maybe a flick, and definitely a water source.
What are some things that a leader must consider when it comes to personnel?
What kind of personnel they're dealing with, whether it be trainees or permanent party, medical.
All right, moving forward are my references I pulled from FM 3-25, -23, 25. Anyway, moving right along. In conclusion of this, we covered why accountability applies to the leader, why that's important, stuff along those natures. I feel like we thoroughly discussed this topic. Are there any questions? All right, cool.